Welcome to the FangledCast, brought to you by Fangled Technologies, where we help you convert every person your company touches into a voracious advocate for your brand. Welcome back to the FangledCast. Today, I've got a great guest, Christopher Nesbit from Nesbit Marketing, who's, to me, the kind of guy you want to know if you're trying to do any kind of B2B marketing strategy through the strategic part, all the way going forward into actual implementation and getting results. I just wanted to say, first of all, thanks for coming on today, Christopher. I'm always glad to have a conversation. I'll give you a couple seconds just to tell the crowd about what you do and your company.
Yeah, thank you, Andrew, and it's great to be here. Andrew and I have worked together on several projects, particularly on a couple speaking projects, and a lot of respect for you.
Okay.
My company, Nesbit Marketing, has been around for just a little while, but been in marketing for a long time. Came from the industrial marketing sector, so I worked for a CNC manufacturer and did all of their marketing for several years, from a very high level, everything from acquisitions to focusing on what is our actual positioning in the market, things like that, and then doing everything that follows to execute an actual campaign, several campaigns, to move the needle. I mean, that's really, at the end of the day, what it's all about, is making sure that the top line revenue continues to grow, especially when companies start to plateau. So that's what we focus on.
That's fantastic. There's a lot of guys in this marketing space. And everyone knows it's kind of like the old joke about what do you call a guy who graduated from medical school at the bottom of his class? Doctor. In the marketing space, there's lots of people who call themselves marketers. In my world, we sort of divide out between who are the strategic marketers, which are usually your C-level, high-level marketing guys, through the very useful and necessary tactical guys. So one of the things that changes dramatically, and there is almost like two separate schools, is that B2B industrial marketing space and then that consumer space. And what I kind of wanted to have a conversation about today was really what separates, what's different about a marketing company, an agency, a fractional marketing officer in that B2B space. What do you look for there as opposed to somebody who does the consumer space? That's kind of a broad question.
It is a very broad question, but we'll do our best to dig into it. So a few of the things that I've noticed between, say, consumer versus, in this case, B2B, more specifically in my case, industrial, is that there's a longer timeline. First of all, the time that you make your first connection with the customer through advertising or social media, in whatever case, you from that point to the time that you close the sale is a much longer duration, and so that becomes more challenging because holding on to a customer for that period of time, keeping their interest, continue to add value. That's not an easy task when you're doing it over 6 months, a year,
Sure.
2 years.
Sure.
And so you have to do more activities. You have to do them at a higher frequency. You have to do with more purpose. And developing those plans takes skill. And there's more tactical involved with it. There's more strategy involved with it. And if you don't do it right, you're actually going to damage that relationship before you ever get to the close. And so you may be getting drop off on your customer journey somewhere along the line.
So if I'm an industrial interest, I manufacture something in an industrial space, and I need help because I really want to expand my market, and I'm out talking to companies in that marketing space. How do I interview, search for someone that really does have experience in moving the needle in that industrial space, as opposed to someone who's done a lot of consumer and sort of says, oh, I also do that?
Well, the first thing that they tell you is you need a new website and you got to do a bunch of advertising. That's a red flag. There should be more to it than that. There should be strategic moves. There should be, trying to do some research as to where you fit in the market. What are your competitors? What is the market doing overall? What are we expecting the market to do over the next 5 years? So they should really be looking at a longer, broader period of time with very focused goals. Where do you want to be in the next 5 years? How much market share do you want to have? How much do you have right now? What's your starting place? Where are you coming from? What is your story? And so that above and beyond, say, the consumer, where you could potentially turn on some pay-per-click advertising, maybe some Facebook advertising. and you can drive traffic through a website that's optimized to take those clicks and convert them into sales. That doesn't work with big ticket sales. You have to get them in touch with a salesperson and then continue to nurture that lead over time in addition to the conversations that are taking place.
So if we're asking, and it leads quite into many conversations that I've had before, even on this podcast, of if they're coming to you with the tools before they have a strategy, they're building a house without a foundation or without a plan. But when how often do you find new engagements where you ask those questions? What do you know about the actual size of your market, the total available market, the players, and the customers? How often are you finding companies that really don't know their customer?
Are more common than it should be. That I think is where the distinction of marketing has changed over many years. For a long time, marketing was a very integral role within a company. It was a very high level position that involved a lot of data, and that data was used to guide the company through complex markets. Nowadays, marketing in a lot of companies is viewed as that advertising and tactical side of things. The problem is that you still need that component to be able to navigate those spaces. And so too many companies that I speak to have that kind of hardwired perception of what it is, and they're missing out, and they're wondering why they're plateauing or why they're in contraction. And it's that shift when you decide to move into the other side of the strategic, that you actually start to move the needle again, because you're able to go out and buy the companies that you need to buy, or you have the ability to go out and get better positioning against your competition. So
yeah, a real common for us in that industrial space, especially in the B2B market, is when we talk to customers about their customer and look at what they're actually marketing to their customer, they really don't understand what the reason is. And many times we've done these studies where we go to the existing customers and say, why do you do business with these guys? What is it about them that you choose when there's so many other options out there in the market? I'm curious if you have some examples of some things that you found in that type of research that can help people understand what we're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many examples, but I would say that overall we find that people kind of make assumptions. They don't ask the questions. They make the assumptions, and then they build off of those assumptions. And so one of my favorite sayings is, when you build systems for smaller operations and then you scale, those little flaws that didn't seem to matter so much in the smaller business become magnified. And so you end up with big holes in your understanding of what your product, what role your product plays in the market. You end up with these big holes, and then you have to go back and patch those holes or readjust your messaging and actually create something that is right for your customer. And then you're going to start to see that particular vertical grow again.
Yeah, it's kind of like all of the news anchors whose careers ended when HDTV came on. And you could see all the pores and the crevices and
I'm sure it hasn't done me any favors. I mean,
yeah, the danger of Zoom. And I don't mean Zoom calls. I mean zooming in on somebody's face.
Zooming in on someone's face.
Yeah, it's interesting because there's a lot of research out there where companies that have really moved the needle in the industrial space, the one key has been discovering not just what are the real challenges that your customers have, but also how you differentiate as or how you should differentiate how you deliver that to them to meet that need. For example, if you're in a product category that's considered commodity, although there may be some minor benefits within it. For example, if you're selling a structural bolt for aviation, and the actual need for that bolt is 1 million pounds of strength, for just a number, I don't know if that exists, and yours does 2 million, and they're currently buying one at 1.5 million, does that extra 500,000 mean anything to them? Probably not. It's an unnecessary thing. You can brag about, well, ours is stronger than theirs, and they go, well, I don't need that. Right. Whereas my current supplier sometimes misses a delivery, and when they miss a delivery, my entire production shuts down. Maybe the pitch has nothing to do with whether your bolt is 500,000 pounds stronger or whatever it is. What your pitch is that customer service, that personal touch, those kinds of things that can make the real difference in that industrial space.
And I love when we when we do find those types of corrections, because you can then just cut through the noise and go straight to the chase, reduce your
Mm-hmm.
you know your contact to close timeline significantly, which increases your top line. So having that messaging, having that understanding, and having those interviews out of the way, and doing them on a regular basis can actually really improve businesses
Yeah.
performance dramatically.
Yeah, a real great example of that. There's an industrial distribution company, and I don't know if you've done much with the distribution market, but imagine what does an inventory person cost, and when they're not there or when they're unavailable. So this particular company set up basically vending machines with the most used components that are under constant use within an industrial space. So now instead of having that person that's constantly bringing them to the line, whenever they need it, they can go to that machine, open the door, and as they remove items, they're charged for them. So they could never run out, and it's up to the distributor to make sure they always have inventory. So, in a world where people think that it's all about price, you're going to be paying a premium for that. But how often have you built strategies and campaigns around the total cost of doing business as opposed to the cost of the part?
So, I mean, I think that really touches on something that I think has been overlooked for too many people, is that marketing doesn't just touch on the beautiful pictures, or the nice sound bites, or the good videos, or any of that, even the trade shows and all of the activities that you do. It touches on so much more than that. You really need to dig deep and make sure that you're looking at your distribution channels, your service channels, or making sure that you understand how every piece of your company touches the world. And if you have a touch to the world, then you need to make sure that you understand it and have it under control. And marketing tends to have the opportunity to look at those things a little bit more objectively, and then adjust and provide some feedback so that it can be adjusted internally.
Yeah. So Christopher, one of the topics that comes up all the time in this space is the conflict between the sales team and the marketing team. Sales team says there's nothing that marketing team could ever do that would help me, and the marketing team says if only those sales guys would listen to us and do what we say, they could implement this strategy and make millions. How in this industrial space have you found methods or ways to really integrate sales and marketing so that they function as a team?
Well, you touched on probably one of the most challenging parts of the marketing staff or strategy team's job, is to try and communicate, one, why it's important, and two, uh, how to navigate getting them to do those things, or even getting feedback from them to utilize to pivot. Um, and so one of the things that I've found that's very helpful is to get that relationship understood very quickly. It definitely requires, your leadership within the company to put it in perspective. It has to be that the CEO or the president has to talk to those salespeople and say, look, this is important. We're going down this path. I need you to work with this person. They're not telling you what to do. They're making requests and they're making suggestions, and they're professionals in what they do. And if you can get that in place pretty early, then a lot of the time it's fairly smooth. And then once they start to see the results of the activities that you're doing and the different strategies that you're implementing, then in that situation, it starts to become less of an issue. But early days, it's a tough position to be in when marketing approaches sales and says, look, we've got all these new ideas, and they're used to doing it a certain way for 10, 15 years.
I'm curious your response to this, and it's a controversial thing I've heard off and on over the years. Marketing teams should consider that their customer is in fact the sales team. Do you think that's accurate?
They're probably the most valuable ally,
Mm-hmm.
but they're also potentially the biggest speed bump.
Yeah.
So I think in that sense that they will probably end up being the focus of your time in a lot of ways. As far as being your customer, since the goal is moving the needle on the company, I think the customer remains the same, and I think the sales team is another mechanism or another lever to pull to get that needle to move.
Hmm.
And so, I do think that they need to work very closely together, but I
Yeah,
wouldn't necessarily go so far and say that the focus has to be keeping the sales team happy.
I tend to agree with you on that. I think it's really short sighted because there needs to be a synergy between both. I've dealt with sales managers, the VP of sales who says, my job is to make sure that I remove every obstacle so that my team can only be selling. All that other stuff. And then it goes to, well, okay, but your team has that direct access to the customer and lots of knowledge that will help us to create even stronger campaigns and programs. How do we bridge that gap between them not being part of the marketing team but having that tribal knowledge that will help the marketing team do better?
And that's really where if you can develop a good relationship that's beneficial to all parties, if you're able to pull information from the front lines, from the sales team, we can feed that back through marketing and improve our front line that technically is in front of that first contact that the salespeople have. So, if we're getting feedback from the sales team, we provide it to the marketing team, then our first touch to the customer can be far more accurate. And that has better sticking power anyways. Um, and I think that as long as you're able to impress that on the sales team, then a lot of the time you're going to get better results. But if you just go in and you say, this is how we're going to do things, and you got to change everything you know how to do, and have learned, gotten used to doing, and your routines and everything, it's not going to work. It really has to be an evolution process. And that's another reason why you have to look at strategy rather than tactical, because if you just do tactical alone without a strategy, you're looking at a very short period of time. Whereas if you look at it from a strategic standpoint, you know that the rollout could be 6 months to 2 years, and that the impacts could be early on. You might get some surge impacts early on, but realistically, the most profound impact is going to be over longer durations of time, especially once you start to develop processes and procedures that especially involve internal staff like sales and service, or however all of your offerings fit together.
Yeah. Have you seen value over your years of doing this in traveling with the sales team and having them introduce you to customers to be able to ask, or do you find that to be a distraction to what the salesman's job really is?
I think it depends on the person, but I think overall that any interaction that you can glean with the customer, and usually the sales team is your main source of being able to do that. I think that's really valuable. There's other ways to make contact with the customer though, and have those conversations as well. You and I have talked outside of this
Right.
about customer outreach and things like that, but also blind interviews and studies and things like that. But in addition to that, if the marketing team is participating in things like trade shows and some of the little micro meetings that you have possibly around the country, those types of situations can bring a lot of light to the conversation as well. The only thing that I find about that is that it is a little bit sheltered, so the customer is going to have a little bit of a bias when they're talking to you. They're going to make you feel good, or they're going to make you not feel good, or they're
Hmm.
going to have an intention behind what they're doing, rather than that raw, real feedback. So if you can get, I think the blind studies are the most valuable, reaching out and getting that voice of the customer.
Yeah, for us, I found when I reach out to a research agency that we'll contract with, who can do that voice of the customer and voice of distributor, voice of market study, knowing that the data that they're collecting is anonymous, and that although the data will get back to our client, the source doesn't. We find that we get significantly better information than a rep from the company going in with all of the baggage that we bring.
Because marketing is the conversation that's happening when you're not in the room.
Your brand is what they think of you when you're not around. It's
Exactly.
all very very important. One of the things, kind of backing up in this conversation. So we're taking on a new client, and they're an industrial, and we're looking both at what's the current voice of the customer, and also what are the viable markets that they could be selling into. For example, your area of expertise was in the cutting tool industry. So there are machine shops and there are manufacturers who do their own machining work, and I'm sure there's how have you seen benefit in breaking down those as silos or market directions or whatever term to really look at the attractiveness and the viability and the profitability to then build campaigns specific to those.
So incredibly valuable. I mean, I think that's, in a short answer, that's the best way to put that. Is it's very valuable. What it does is when you can lay it all out in front of you and you can say, all right, these are our silos. We know that we've addressed this silo, and this silo, but we haven't even really considered this other one, and it's actually a very big market. Wow, look, there's not a whole lot of competition there, but the competition that is there is stiff. So, is it worth investing in that
Mm-hmm.
to at least test it, right? A lot of the time, what I found is that if you can break it down like that and really have a bird's eye view on everything that's available to you, there are options out there that maybe never got considered, because a lot of the time these companies kind of follow the path of least resistance, which isn't a bad thing. But when you get to a higher level and you're trying to break plateaus, you have to be able to launch new verticals or explore new markets pretty nimbly. And
Mm-hmm.
if you only ever wait for that work to come to you through something like word of mouth, you're going to miss opportunities and you're not going to scale. You're not going to grow quickly. You're not going to break plateaus. And so if you can break it down, you'll have a better outcome that way.
Yep. Have you had much experience in utilizing CRM in a way that the sales team benefits from it and doesn't see it as Big Brother, but also to gather that data that the marketing team needs to be able to make decisions based on what's going on in the market?
It's another challenging piece, but it is really valuable both for the sales team and for the marketing team. For the sales team, because that's going to be where the marketing team wants to jump on that. They want that information. They're hungry for it. That's always been the way it is. The sales team, maybe. I found that younger sales teams tend to take to it a lot faster, a lot easier. But like I said, anytime you have those set in stone sales teams, it's challenging to get them on board. Once they start using it, they realize it's basically their Rolodex, except it's digital. They can pull it up on their phone and they can move a lot faster with it as long as they're staying on top of it. And so, it's that stage of convincing them that this is a better tool. But once they understand that's a better tool, everybody's happy the C-level executives have a much better picture of what's actually happening in their company as far as job flow and timelines and everything that's really important to make decisions for the company.
What do you think are some of the main reasons that the sales team wouldn't want to use a CRM that's designed to help the marketing team get the information?
Kind of leans back to some of the things we talked about. There is definitely some differences and probably some overlap. I think that's really what causes a lot of the friction between sales and marketing, is that there is overlap, and so one department thinks that the other department's trying to take their job and run with it, but that's not necessarily the case. When a marketing team proposes it to the sales team, as we're looking to collect more data, the sales team sees it as that they're just trying to, like you said, be big brother on the whole thing, and they don't necessarily want to be held accountable for the calls that they make or the emails they send or any of the above. So, and I can understand that position, but at the same time, when we're getting paid to do what we do, all of us, whether it's sales or marketing, that's a piece that makes the company better. At that point, really, you have to get past that and get it. And once you do, the impact is incredible. I mean, the effect of CRM on companies when it's done effectively and it's built correctly and it's being monitored correctly and efficiently. In those situations, you get so much data that you never even knew, and you can make those adjustments. And it's not hard to make those adjustments because you have everything you need in front of you to make a good decision.
Yeah, it's interesting because it's one of those hot or cold, on or off things. It's rare that you find a company that kind of likes their CRM. It's either they set it up as an electronic babysitter to steal the tribal knowledge and make people have an extra job as a clerk,
Right.
or it's a dynamic, functioning, campaign generating, data gathering, blessing for the company.
Really can reduce the amount of work that a company needs to do also. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
you touch on a really interesting point about campaign automation and things like that, drip
Yep.
campaigns, nurturing campaigns, all of the above. Because if you can put a name in there and you know that customer Y is interested in product Z, and you can tell your CRM that, then all of a sudden you're sending them once a month emails saying, "Hey, here's some pictures of product Z.
Yeah.
Here's some information about it. This is a new product that we're releasing that's similar to product Z." And you can set all that up to be automated. You don't ever have to touch it. And then all of a sudden, the leads just reach back out and say, "Hey, I would really like to talk to you about getting an order of product Z or
Yeah.
a product of ZY." And
Absolutely.
that is so valuable. And that helps the salesperson because then all of a sudden they don't have to send all those emails. They don't have to do all of the, the nitty gritty stuff that makes their job challenging. They'll be able to close more. And most of these people are based on commission, right? So if they're
Yeah.
closing more, they're making more. And, just a little secret out there for all the salespeople. Marketing doesn't operate on commission. We don't get those little bumps when the sales go up. So you guys are in a really fortunate position to gain something from taking on some
Yeah.
tools.
Yeah, it's interesting because one of the other things that I've found, and especially in the industrial space, and a word that when someone uses, I always make them define, is lead generation. When someone says I'm in lead generation, I want to know what that means to them. Does it mean you got a list of names and you don't know who they are, but they supposedly could do something? Or have you qualified and verified that these are potentially leads that can become accounts and do business with us? So with the CRM,
Right.
once someone has qualified those leads, it's a great way to know in a campaign whether or not each of those touches have happened and what's the progress, and also to be able to forecast based on where those leads are in that sales process. Are they first contacted? Have you had that meeting? Have you discussed all of those things that make up the sales?
Stage in the pipeline.
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's what's really interesting to me. You said something about lead generation there, and I think that the terminology really needs from a big picture. Terminology needs to get adjusted. Really, what companies are after, they want lead generation, but what they're asking for is prospect generation.
Yes.
If you could say, "I need prospect generation," so that I know who I can cold call, who I can reach out to, who I can put into a campaign, and see what that does. That's a prospect. That's not necessarily a lead. A lead is more likely somebody who's like ready to buy. They've already reached out to you, and that's a whole different set of
Hmm.
criteria than a prospect. And so that's one thing that I've run across quite a bit is like that distinction can be very valuable if you're able to start to separate those a little bit and say, well, early days, a prospect is a cold lead.
For us, depending on the complexity, we start with what we call a suspect.
Mhm.
We suspect that that's somebody who might be in our market space we don't know. That's what you get off a list. Lists of things are suspects. And then when you go through and you verify that in fact they could possibly do business with you, then they're a prospect. And then when
I
there's
like
a
that.
chance that they want to talk to you about it, they're a lead. And when they start talking and having meetings and discussing what their needs are and what their problems are and what their pains are, then they become an account. And an account then becomes a customer when they start buying.
Even adding that one extra step, and it's little things like that that make the world of a difference in how you touch your customers, how you
Yeah.
understand your customers. And once you start to define that a little bit better, things move a lot smoother. But it does take some time to set it up. And it's not, building something from scratch when it's never been done.
Hmm. Yeah, there's going to be
It's challenging. And so
a
that's why
future
you need to
episode of the FangledCast specifically talking about unique uh, lead nurturing programs, which go from through that process and how you manage it. I mean, in the old days of sales, leads were gold. Somebody handed you a lead, you were going to follow up on it because that meant it could turn into business, and that was your bread and butter. Nowadays, I've come across sales teams that have tons of leads, and nobody wants to be cold called, nobody wants this, and they're really missing out on that whole nurturing part of how with inbound and all the technology and personal touch that we have today, understanding our customer, how those can be golden again. And that'll be the subject of another. But we're running out of time, so I got to ask you one more question. What should I have asked
first,
that I didn't?
I'm going to make a joke. How's this? what is the one thing? What is the one thing that people should know about marketing? I've been asked that before, and it cracks me up. No, I would say generally, like, what is the reason that a company should be doing marketing? And that this is specific to each individual company. It's not, every company has the same reason. More people ask that question. What does it mean to our company? Why is it important to us? What's our goal? What do we want to achieve? If you come to the table with that when you're talking to somebody who does marketing, you're going to get better results. Because if you don't come to the table understanding what you want out of it, then that person who's going to be potentially talking to you about strategies and next steps is going to base it off of what they see in the company rather than, and you want to make sure that those goals align. Because if they don't align, it's challenging for everybody. And then, you don't want to be putting a bunch of time and money into something that's not right for that particular company. So I think, making sure that we ask the customer early on is, what do you expect out of this?
That we've talked about before, marketing's job at the core is what? It's to make sure that every employee and everything that our company touches converts those people into voracious advocates for our brand. That's the magic.
That is the magic. And evangelize customers and contacts, that is where companies turn the corner. If they don't have some form of evangelized base, then chances are you're not doing too well. That's the conversation that's happening behind closed doors, and that is the most powerful form of marketing is word of mouth. And if you can't figure out a way to tap into that, then you're going to spend millions of dollars to try and get to the same place that you would if people are speaking kindly about your company.
And making 3 right turns to go right back where you started.
Exactly.
So if someone wants to reach out and talk with you personally, what's the best way to find Christopher Nesbit and Nesbit Marketing?
LinkedIn's a great place to touch base with me. I'm on there all day. I'm not super active as far as posting just because I'm very busy with a separate project that we're working on. But so Christopher Nesbit on LinkedIn, and then Nesbit Marketing on almost all the social media platforms, as well as Chris at nesbitmarketing.com. Any of those would get direct line of contact.
Well, this has been fantastic. I always get something out of sitting and chatting with you, Christopher. You're really good at what you do, and I'm glad that you're part of the network of great B2B marketers that I like to hang out with.
Hey, right back at you, Andrew, and thank you for having me on the show. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, for those who are watching and enjoying the podcast, there's more great stuff coming up. Please comment on the YouTube, comment in LinkedIn, subscribe, send up smoke signals, the occasional telex to an antique company that needs to modernize and get to know us a little bit more.
A little Morse code.
Smoke signals, Morse code, whatever it takes. We're glad that you're here. Thanks for enjoying the FangledCast, and we'll be back with another interesting interview soon. Brought to you by Fangled Technologies, where we help you convert every person your company touches into a voracious advocate for your brand.